Jesus has a cure for adultery. And if we take him seriously enough, he also has a cure for lust. In the Sermon on the Mount, what he's doing here in the middle of chapter 5 is he's reinterpreting the law. He's not throwing it out. He has to set that up in the previous verses. He's not throwing out the law and the prophets, but rather he's here to fulfill them, to show people how they're actually supposed to interpret these things. And then, if they interpret them properly, to live them out. And so we're looking at the ways that Jesus is teaching these Old Testament laws in new ways. And here it comes to the commandment about adultery. We're starting in verse 27. You've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. All right, Jesus is talking really serious in this text here. But what he's doing is he's further developing what it means to live the life of the kingdom, what it means to go beyond the righteousness of the Pharisees, not just following rules and making sure that you're not sinning in one way, but rather having your internal condition of your heart transformed. He even says, when you lust after someone in your heart, you have committed adultery with them already, drawing our attention inwards, similar to the murder passage. Before, it was about killing someone out there in the world, but then he's like, hey, how about the anger and the devaluing of humans and the grudges and the lack of reconciliation that happens in your heart and your mind? That's what needs to be fixed. So it's no different in this passage. What Jesus is trying to do here is essentially say, hey, it's not just an outside in the world issue. Yes, adultery, when that goes down, is something that happens between two people outside in the world, or multiple people, or whatever. Adultery is something that happens out there. But Jesus says, here's what we're going to do. We're going to not focus only exclusively on what happens out there, but we're going to focus on what happens in here. And lust, an inordinate desire for someone who is not yours, a desire or a drive to claim and possess one as your own. That, if that gets cleaned out, if that gets fixed, well, then the adultery problem gets solved automatically. Right? If you solve the heart issue, then the external problem automatically gets solved. So what Jesus isn't saying here, I think sometimes people are like, it's the heart that matters, but then they use that as an excuse to say, so I can do whatever I want out here. No, if you fix the heart, then the external actions automatically follow. That's what happens in the kingdom. When God reigns in your life, it changes the way that you behave in the world. And so what Jesus does here with lust and adultery is actually really revolutionary. For one, because Jesus is really smart and he's saying, okay, let's stop trying to tinker with things out here. Let's fix the underlying condition. But even beyond that, in his day, he's breaking the normal molds that people would usually teach with on this subject. One of the common things that rabbis would teach is that that women are the problem. Women are very seductive and there's a great evil. And so this is why they need to be covered up, or this is why they need to be avoided. And this is why they are the problem. But notice that Jesus talking to a bunch of dudes, you can tell he's talking to guys because in the rest of the text, he's referring to things that men do. And in the beginning of the text, it talks about approaching his disciples. And if we're going with the official 12, it's a list of men. And so Jesus says, okay, I'm talking to a group of men, and normally here's how the talk would go. Hey guys, you just got to be careful because, those ladies out there, they're out there to get you and they're going to seduce you and lead you astray. And so they're the bad. But what Jesus says is, hey, if you struggle with lust, he then puts the responsibility back into the camp of the person doing the lusting. He doesn't say, if you lust after someone, you've committed adultery with them in your hearts, so better cover up the women or better stay away from women. But instead what he says is, if that's a struggle for you, cut out your eye, cut off your hand. You got to deal with these things in that way. Now, before we get too far in that plucking out your eye and cutting off your hand, we'll unpack that in a second. Before we get there, we do need to figure out, okay, well, how do we stop lusting? I mean, it seems like great church advice, right? Good job, Jesus. You said stop lusting. I guess I'll just stop just like with the sheer willpower, I will stop lusting. I don't think it works like that. And I think that what we need to do is we need to figure out what is the underlying condition, what is the kingdom value that would then automatically usurp the problem of lust, of desiring someone who is not yours, of wanting to claim another human being as your own. And so we have to think, how do we fix that? You can't just grin and bear it, right? A little thought experiment that shows that you can't just like try hard enough and fix lust. I want you to not think about an orange. Do not think about an orange right now. Don't think about the fruit. Don't think about the peel. Don't think about the way that you have to peel off the peel in order to eat an orange. Don't think about the way some oranges are juicier than others. Don't think about the way it feels to get some of that stuff stuck under your nails. Don't think about the way an orange smells. Don't think about orange juice. Don't think about anything adjacent to oranges. Maybe even stay away from the color orange. What are all of you thinking right now? Right? Every single one of you is thinking about oranges. Because if you focus all of your energy on thinking about what you're not supposed to be thinking about, you're going to still be thinking about the thing that you're not supposed to be thinking about. Which this is why the underlying condition, the solution to lust is not, well, better not lust, better not focus on the people that you're trying not to lust after, because then all that's going to happen is you're going to still be equally obsessed. There's still going to be this inordinate desire. There's still going to be an obsession and the thing in your mind. It's just going to be a negative one instead of an affirmative one. So here's what you do instead. You focus on the virtue that will fix lust. And here it is. Contentment. This is the kingdom value. If you are content, you will not struggle with lusting after people that are not yours. If you are content with your wife, with your partner, with your life, if you're content with your husband, you will not struggle with wanting someone else. Contentment is the path towards alleviating lust, and getting rid of lust is the path to getting rid of adultery. And Lord knows we have a world that really desperately needs to figure out a solution to the adultery issue, but we have a culture that thrives on paying the bills with lust. And so here's where you start. You start with contentment. You start with gratitude. You start with looking at the things that you do have, at the spouse, the partner, the family that you do have, and you start with gratitude for what you have instead of feeding the animal inside of you that wants something that you don't have. That's how you find freedom from lust, is you find contentment. Now, on top of that, then part of the path is not just gratitude and intentionally changing your mind to be positive, but also there is this element that Jesus addresses at the end of it, where he says, okay, cut off your hands, pluck out your eyes. Which, if you think about it, that's pretty extreme. But I think it makes a lot of sense. Now, what I'm not saying is, all right, everybody, get a spoon so we can pop that thing out, or I'm not going to pass out knives or ship you any knives or whatever. What I am going to say is, let's look at what he's trying to teach us. So, can you still lust? Can you still do inappropriate things with these things? Can you still do inappropriate things with your body if you cut off your hands? Can you still lust if you pop out your eye? Right? The only cure for lust is to get rid of your brain, which then you die. And that's a whole nother problem, right? We don't want people doing that just to get away from sin. And so we then have to ask the question, what does it look like for us to radically amputate things from our lives that then help us to be free from lust? Now, this radical amputation thing, I think, is actually one of the keys to contentment. I think while we are doing the affirmative side that says, okay, I want to intentionally be cultivating a life and a heart and a mind that appreciates and is grateful for what I do have. At the same time, we know that there are areas of struggle that lure us into desiring things that are beyond what we have in our lives. We know that there are things that might entice us elsewhere. And the solution that Jesus offers here is not pointing the finger at all the bad things out there in the world and saying, let's get rid of all those things. But it's about removing something from your own life, maybe something that might even hurt you. Like, let's say that you are used to scrolling through social media in your bed until you fall asleep. There's some issues with like your sleep cycle and all of that and actually falling asleep. But there might not be anything necessarily intrinsically wrong about doing that. But if you know that that's the specific state that puts you in a state where you might see things on a screen that invite you to lust, well then better to cut that off and just have to stare at the ceiling until you fall asleep than to miss the kingdom of heaven. Right? Or maybe you know that there are certain relationships that maybe are unhealthy relationships that might be luring you away from contentment and connection with your own family and spouse. Well, then, yeah, it might make things a little bit awkward, but better to lose a limb or an eye or have an awkward situation in the workplace than to miss the kingdom of heaven. And so, this radical amputation thing I think can still be applied. Even if we're not popping out our eyes and cutting off our hands, there are things in your life, places in your life, habits in your life, behaviors in your life that you know are just inherently tempting to you. And so while you are cultivating a heart of gratitude and a heart of contentment, you also want to do yourself a favor and help yourself along on that journey. And I can say that, I don't know if this is a strange thing to say, but I think, in my opinion, my wife is the most beautiful woman on this planet. Now, I say that my wife is the most beautiful woman on this planet, not because there's some objective measure of what beauty is, right? Not like a certain amount of facial symmetry and an appropriate height and an appropriate shape and appropriate size and appropriate smell. Like this is what the most attractive human is supposed to look like. And she meets all of those criteria, 10 out of 10. That's what makes her the most attractive person. And what makes my wife the most attractive woman in the world to me is the fact that she is my wife and I've spent almost 20 years now only looking at her in that way. I spent 20 years working on growing a heart and cultivating a relationship and cultivating connection that makes me think I am really content with this woman. And because I've been cultivating that, she is the most beautiful woman in the world to me. And your spouse can be the most handsome man, the most beautiful woman in the world to you. If you follow Jesus' advice, radical amputation where necessary, and also intentionally crafting a heart of contentment so that you can know that you have it good right now. To my single friends out there, I just want to let you know that I feel for you. Society seems to be set up against you. Because, I mean, what I just said is probably easy to put into practice. I mean, well, it's not that easy, but it's at least those are actionable steps. But when your spouse or the person that you're with is a hypothetical in the future, I totally get the fact that, yeah, that's really, really difficult. But I also know that the habits that you start today don't automatically disappear when you say I do. And so, yeah, maybe you're not married to someone right now, but if you have a habit of checking out every person that walks by that is attractive and doing things in your mind and in your heart that are not appropriate, well, then that habit won't die when you say I do. The things that we do in our lives, they cultivate well, not just like habits of the soul, but like neural pathways. Like our brains are lazy, and so if you get into a routine or a habit, your brain's going to be like, I know how to do this thing, so I'm going to keep doing that thing. And so to my single friends, yeah, I know it's hard, but I would encourage you to focus on ways that you can cultivate practices of contentment and gratitude in your life instead of looking around for what you're missing and desiring what is not yours. And so let's wrap this thing up. What Jesus wants us to do is to experience the good life of the kingdom of God. And the good life of the kingdom of God is a life where people are valued, like we talked about with the murder section. And the good life of the kingdom of God is where you are content, right where you are. You realize that you have everything that you need, and there's plenty of reason to be thankful and grateful. So go live in the kingdom of God. Radically amputate the things that pull you away from God's kingdom, and be grateful to our Father who gives every good and perfect gift, including the one that lives with you in your house.